In this video, we're going to be configuring Firebase integration for our Flutter app specifically for the iOS platform. Now, this is a pretty straightforward process, but if you're going to be using Google Sign-In, there's one step at the end that's rather important, so be sure to stick around and take a look at that. So let's jump into the code and get started. Okay, to add the iOS app into Firebase for your Flutter application, head over to the Firebase console and click Add App. Then click iOS, and this will bring up the iOS app edition screen. First thing it's going to ask for is the bundle ID, and this is basically the organization and app name that you typed in when you created your Flutter application. However, one of the things we're going to need to do is open up Xcode and do a couple things in there throughout this process. So let's go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and open up Xcode, click Open Project or File, and locate the root project that you've been using for your Flutter application. We actually don't want to open up this base folder. You want to select the iOS folder in there and then select Open. This will open Xcode and load your application in it. Now you see on this main page here, I've got runner selected and I'm on the general tab here. And we have the bundle identifier that we chose when we created this application. So I'm going to go ahead and click. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and go over to my console and add that in. And then for the name, just add in whatever you want. We'll call this FF Auth and we'll register our application. The App Store ID is optional. You can actually add that later on if you want to redirect over to the App Store. Now that we've got that registered, we need to download the services file. So click Download GoogleService-Info.plist. This will download the file that we need to register our application. Now that the file is downloaded, we need to add that to the Xcode project. This is one of the important parts that you need to do in Xcode. So we're going to go ahead and drag this into Xcode, and it needs to be in runner, and we'll just drop it here above the main storyboard. When I drop that, it's going to bring up this pop-up, and the key thing you need to take note of is to make sure it says copy items if needed and make sure that's checked. Go ahead and click Finish on that. And as far as the instructions go for Flutter, this is the final step. From here, they suggest adding your dependencies to the pub/spec YAML. However, one thing I found is that if you try to add Google login, there are a couple of issues and Google requires a couple extra steps. So while we're in here setting this up, we will go and set that up as well. So for Google Sign-In, it requires a URL scheme. So go click over on General, but we actually need to be in the Info tab. And you'll see down here that it needs a URL type. We don't have any URL types listed. So we're going to need to add a URL type. You can find the URL type in your Google Services-Info. And basically it's this reverse client ID. So go ahead and select that reverse client ID. You can double click on that and then just copy that and click on runner and back over info. And under the URL types, go ahead and click plus to add a new one. Add your URL scheme and paste that in there. And then just click out of there and we're done with that section. And now that you've got the URL scheme added in the URL types, you've got Xcode configured the way it needs to be for your project. If you come back over to the Firebase setup, you'll see that there's some additional steps. These steps are not required for Flutter. Flutter will take care of adding the Firebase SDK for you and initializing your code. And that's all you need to configure your Flutter application for iOS Firebase integration.